A brooch is sitting on my counter. No hallmark, no signature, no box, no papers, no story. The seller called it vintage, which is a word that means whatever the seller needs it to mean. Here's what almost nobody knows. There is a date on that brooch anyway, not written in numbers, written in the shape of the clasp on the back. Every clasp type in history has an invention date, some of them down to the exact patent, and forgers almost never bother to fake the one part of a piece nobody looks at. So today, 7 old clasps that reveal a piece's real age, and we are going to do this differently. This is a time machine. We start at today and walk backwards, decade by decade, all the way to the 1840s. 7 stops. And at the end, we come back to the brooch on my counter and date it together in about 15 seconds, using nothing but what you are about to learn. One rule before we start, and it is the most important sentence in this video. A clasp sets a floor, not a date. A piece cannot be older than the technology holding it shut. It can always be younger. Hold on to that, because it is the difference between reading clasps like an expert and getting fooled by them. And on any brooch, you are reading 3 things. The catch, which is the part that grips the pin. The hinge, where the pin pivots. And the pin itself, especially how long it is. 3 witnesses on every single piece. Let us start the clock and begin walking backwards. Number 7. The modern rollover catch. Today, back to the 1920s. Turn over almost any brooch made in the last 100 years, and you will find the same thing. A small round housing with a little jaw that rotates across the opening and locks the pin inside. Smooth, machine-made, completely standardized. This is the rollover safety catch, and it became the industry standard through the 1920s and 30s and simply never left. So here's your baseline, and it cuts hard. If a brooch carries a machine-made rollover catch, the honest reading is 20th century, and overwhelmingly after the 20s. It does not matter how Victorian the front looks. It does not matter that the seller says estate. The catch is announcing a floor, and the floor is the jazz age. Now, one door stays open, and we will walk through it properly at the end. Catches get replaced because catches break. A rollover on an otherwise old piece can be an honest repair, but notice what the rule says. The piece cannot be older than the catch unless the catch arrived later, and if it arrived later, there will be evidence. Fresh solder. A little pad that does not match the metal around it. Wear on the body that the catch does not share. The back tells on itself. Number 6. The bullet catch. 1911. Take one step back, and the housing changes shape. A small cylinder, like a tiny barrel or a bullet lying sideways, with a rotating jaw inside. This is the rolling jaw catch, and it has a birthday. It was patented in 1911, developed by a man named Morehouse for the findings maker B.A. Ballou & Company. That patent is a gift, because it is a hard anchor. A genuine bullet catch cannot exist on a piece made before 1911. Full stop. So when you see that little barrel, you are holding something from the 1910s or later, and on American-made pieces, it is one of the most reliable signposts there is. And feel the difference in the era it comes from. This is the moment jewelry manufacturing becomes properly industrial. The catch is precise, repeatable, identical from piece to piece, because it is coming off machinery rather than out of a craftsman's fingers. That uniformity is itself a dating clue. When every example looks exactly alike, you are in the machine age. Number 5, the lever safety catch. 1901. Another step back, and we reach the patent that changed everything. And this one has a name and an address. In 1901, Herpers Brothers, a findings manufacturer in Newark, New Jersey, patented the lever safety catch. AC-shaped catch with a small lever that rotates across the opening and traps the pin. Newark matters in this story. It was the center of American jewelry manufacturing, and once this catch existed, it swept the market. By 1920, it dominated American brooch production so completely that finding an American piece from the 20s without one is the exception. So the lever catch draws you a box. After 1901, certainly. American, very probably. And here is the detail that sharpens it further. The earliest lever catches still carry traces of hand finishing, small asymmetries, file marks, slightly uneven levers. By the 20s, they are perfectly uniform. So the catch does not just say after 1901. The quality of its manufacture whispers how far after. If a piece of this is already making you want to flip over everything you own, subscribe, because we are about to cross out of the machine age entirely, and the last 3 stops are where the real detective work lives. Number 4, the handmade safety catches, the 1890s. Now we cross a threshold, because one more step back and the patents disappear. We are in the 1890s, and this is the experimental decade. Jewelers knew the plain open catch had a problem. Pins slipped, brooches fell, pieces got lost. So all through the 90s, individual workshops started inventing their own solutions by hand, one bench at a time. Little caps that swing over the opening. Odd loops. One-off locking gadgets that exist on a handful of pieces and nowhere else. No 2 workshops solved it quite the same way. which means that when you turn over a brooch and find a safety mechanism that looks strange, slightly clumsy, clearly handmade, and unlike anything in a modern catalog, you should not read that as cheapness. You should read it as a date. You are almost certainly looking at the transition window, roughly 1890 to 1901, after the idea of a safety catch existed and before the patents standardized it. That is a narrow window, 10 years wide, and the weirdness of the catch is exactly what pins it down. In every other field, strange means suspicious. Here, strange means dateable. And there is a bonus hiding in these oddities, because each of these mechanisms was one workshop's private solution. A strange catch sometimes ties a piece to a specific maker or region, the way a fingerprint would. Collectors of this period photograph the backs of brooches as carefully as the fronts, and now you know why. Number 3, the trombone catch. 1850, and this one tells you where. Step back again, and we meet my favorite clasp in this entire video, because it does something none of the others can. It does not just date a piece, it locates it. The trombone catch is a small hollow tube with a plunger that pulls out and pushes back in, exactly like the slide of a trombone. The pin tip sits inside the tube, and to open it, you pull the slide. The design traces to Charles Rowley of Birmingham, whose patents around 1849 and 1850 stand behind the date you will see quoted everywhere, and the catch stayed in use for nearly a century, right into the 1940s. A 100-year window sounds useless for dating. Here's why it is not. The trombone is a European signature. French, Austrian, German, and Czech makers used it constantly. American factories almost never did, because America went down the lever catch road after 1901. So a trombone catch is a passport. Find one on a marcasite brooch or a molded glass piece, and you are very likely holding continental Europe, somewhere between the 20s and the 40s. Find one on a fine Victorian piece, and you are likely in Britain or France in the second half of the 1800s. One clasp, and suddenly you know which side of the Atlantic your brooch was born on. No other fastening does that. Number 2, the hinge, the witness nobody thinks to question. Now we stop looking at the catch entirely, and this is the step most people never take, because the hinge is the single most honest component on the back of a brooch. Here is why. Catches break and get replaced. Pins bend and get replaced. But the hinge is soldered into the body of the piece, and replacing it is enough work that it usually stays original for the life of the brooch. The catch can lie by being a repair. The hinge almost never does. And hinges split cleanly into two families. From roughly 1850 to 1910, hinges were tube hinges, built by hand from 3 little tubes of hollow metal, 2 soldered to the brooch and 1 to the pin, with a wire running through all 3. Under a loop, you can see the joins, the solder, the slight irregularity of handwork. Then in the 1920s, machine-made round hinges arrived, neat little pressed assemblies, identical every time, and by the early 30s they were the standard, which gives you a beautifully hard rule. A round machine hinge cannot predate the 20s. Physically cannot. So when a seller tells you a brooch is Victorian and you turn it over and find a crisp round machine hinge, the conversation is over. Whatever the catch says, whatever the front says. Read the hinge first. It is the component with the least reason to lie. One more detail while you are there. On a tube hinge, look at the wire running through the tubes. On genuinely old pieces, it is often slightly bent from a century of opening and closing, and the tubes show wear where the pin has rubbed. That soft, earned wear is very hard to fake convincingly, and its absence on a supposedly Victorian piece is worth noticing. Number 1, the long pin and the open C, before 1890. And here we are, the deepest stop on the line, the oldest signal you will commonly meet, and the one that takes you back before 1890. Two things appear together. The first is the plain C catch, just an open curve of metal with no lock, no lever, no moving parts, the pin simply resting in the hook. The second is the giveaway, and it is the pin itself. On genuinely early pieces, the pin is long. Noticeably, almost comically long, extending well past the edge of the brooch, sometimes by half its width again. That length was not carelessness, it was engineering. Victorian clothing was heavy, layered wool and thick silk and dense weaves, and a brooch stayed put by weaving that long pin deep through the fabric and back out. The extra length was the security system, decades before anybody built security into the catch, so the combination reads like a sentence. Long pin reaching past the edge, plus an open C, plus a handmade tube hinge, and you are before 1890 into the heart of the Victorian era and sometimes earlier. Short pin with the same C catch, and you have drifted to roughly 1890 through 1910, the years when pins shrank but locks had not yet taken over. The oldest date stamp in this video is not a mechanism at all. It is 3/4 of an inch of extra steel. Now, before we go back to the brooch on my counter, 3 traps, because clasps can mislead you in exactly 3 ways, and I want you armed against all of them. Trap 1. The C catch proves nothing on its own. Here is the uncomfortable truth about number 1. A plain C catch has no moving parts, which means it never became obsolete. It cost nothing to make. So cheap brooches carried plain C catches decades after safety catches existed, and reproductions carry them today precisely because buyers have half learned this lesson. A C catch is the absence of evidence, not evidence of age. It sets the floor at ancient, which is no floor at all. It only starts meaning something when the pin length and the hinge agree with it. Trap 2. The replaced catch. Catches are the part that breaks, so on genuinely old pieces, you will constantly meet a modern rollover sitting on a Victorian body. That is usually an honest repair, not a fake, and here is how you tell. Look for the seam. A repair leaves fresh solder, a small pad of newer metal, a catch whose wear does not match the wear of the body around it. An honest repair lowers collector value somewhat, but it does not make the piece a lie. The lie runs the other way, when someone solders a Victorian-style catch onto a modern casting, and the same seam evidence exposes that too. Trap 3. The front must agree with the back. A clasp is one witness, never the whole case. If the back says 1880s, but the front is a casting style that did not exist until the 50s, believe the contradiction, not either half of it. Real pieces agree with themselves. Assembled pieces argue. So, the brooch on my counter. Let us date it, out loud, the way you now can. I turn it over. The hinge first, always. 3 little tubes, visible solder joins, slight irregularity. Handmade tube hinge, so we are somewhere between 1850 and 1910, and the 20s are off the table. The catch next. A small hollow tube with a plunger. Trombone, so almost certainly continental Europe, and consistent with the hinge window. The pin last. It reaches past the edge of the body, but only slightly, not the dramatic Victorian overhang, so late in the window rather than early. Put the 3 witnesses together and they agree. Continental Europe, roughly 1880s to around 1900. 15 seconds, no hallmark, no papers, no expert. Just the back of the piece telling the truth about itself, the way it has been doing for 140 years while everyone looked at the front. The honest note, because this channel does not oversell. A clasp gives you an era, not a year, and one component can always have been replaced. Real dating stacks evidence. The clasp, the hinge, the pin, the construction, the materials, the style, and lets them vote. When they all agree, you can trust the answer. When they argue, the argument itself is the answer, and it usually spells assembled. And when the vote matters, when there is real money or real history on the table, the answer is the one this channel gives every week. Take it to a good independent jeweler or a specialist in antique jewelry. They will read the back under a loupe while you watch, and they have seen 1,000 of these seams and windows. That opinion costs little and settles much. Now go do the sweep. Every brooch in the house, face down. Read the hinge, read the catch, measure the pin with your eye. Then tell me in the comments what you found. The trombone that turned out to be your great-grandmother's Austrian brooch. The Victorian piece with the suspiciously modern catch. The long pin that reaches past the edge. I read every one, and the best finds on this channel always come out of the comments. This channel takes no sponsorships and no paid placements. No brand, no dealer, and no auction house pays to be praised or buried here. And that independence is the only reason I can tell you to trust a bent piece of steel on the back over every word printed on the tag. If straight answers like this are why you keep coming back, the join button below makes you a member and keeps these breakdowns honest. The front of a piece is what the maker wanted you to see. The back is what the maker could not help leaving behind. Read the back. I will see you in the next one.